6-part story, over 7 minutes long. Watch it, enjoy it, have fun. She called me an idiot. You want to know why? Subscribe to my channel, and I'll tell you. Yep. Good job. Now, you wouldn't believe it. I was going to an event, and I got lost in the countryside. I did. And I was someplace I never was before. And I ran into this, I came into this village. Man, I don't know if I got in a car accident, I was dead or what, because I didn't know this village existed in the middle of nowhere. And then I saw these two ladies at the end of a driveway, so I stopped, and one of them I knew, but the other one I didn't. It was her cousin, I guess. And she looked at me and she said, "Are you lost?" I said, "Apparently so." She said, "You're an idiot." Wow, when her cousin looked and she couldn't believe she said it, she grabbed me by the arm, the cousin, she took me over and she said, "I'm sorry, my cousin was like that. Sir, I'll help you." I said, "Well, it's okay. I know why your cousin was like that." She said, "Well, tell me why." I said, No. You wait. Just tell me something. What? I said, "Do you know where you're at?" She looked at me. She said, "You're the one that's lost." I said, "Yeah, I know, but if you told me where you were, I'd be at the same place." She said, "That kind of makes sense." So anyways, she told me how to get on the ferry and all this stuff. It was really cool. And she said, "Now, tell me." She told me where it was, too. I thought, wow, I heard of this place before, but I didn't know it actually existed. But anyways, I'm not going to tell you where. She said, "Now tell me about your cousin." My cousin. I said, "Well, she thinks I'm hot." She says she doesn't. I know my cousin, and she wouldn't do that. She called you an idiot. I don't know why. I said, she was just teasing, like she thinks I'm hot. She said, "No, she's not like that." I said, "Okay, I'm going to leave now. And she'll probably give me a hug before I go." She said, "There's no way in the world she'll give you a hug." Remember, I knew the girl, right? So I went over and I said, "I'm leaving now. Would you need a hug, young lady?" And she gave me a great big hug, and her cousin was shocked. And I gave him my car. I started to drive away. My window was open in the car. And my friend, she blew it. She said, "Goodbye, John." Bye for now. Oh, look. I sure hope you subscribed like you promised. Do you want to hear part 2 of that story? When I got to the ferry, yeah, I was first one in line, and I get out to kind of look. There was a little spot there, a swimming place, I guess, for some people, and I wanted to look at it, and this car come roaring up behind my car, come screeching to a halt. 4 ladies jumped out. I said, "My heavens, is word out in this mystery village that there's a single man in town?" I don't know. One lady come running right over and stood beside me. She said, "Isn't it beautiful?" Now, I had no idea what she meant. I know. I really didn't. But I thought if I just agreed with her, how could I go wrong? Right? So I said, "Yes. Yes." And she said, "I just marvel at it every time I come here." I said, "Oh, wow, that's good." I said, "How often do you come here?" She said, "Every day." She said, "I just live down the road." I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "We're going over for ice cream. Do you want to come?" I said, "I'm kind of in a hurry." I wasn't in a hurry, but I was scared. All right, you should stay tuned for part 3. Part 3, go back and watch 1 and 2, and subscribe to my channel. Anyways, part 3, I got across the ferry, no problem. I got to my destination. The reason I went, got a phone call early that day, and asked me to help. I said, "What do you need help with?" She said, "If I tell you, you won't come, so just come." I said, "Okay." "Wear old clothes?" She said, "Yeah, okay." And it was. I got there, and it was pretty terrible, and I did it. And anyways, I was kind of grimy, and it was hot and sunny, and I was sweaty, and I went in the river, and everything was pretty good. And then I said, I'm going home. I'm tired. It's starting to rain. It's starting to pour, and I got soaked. I was just soaked. But on my way home, I stopped at this event. It was a charity thing, and I just went in and I made a small donation. And they said, "Are you staying?" I said, "I really can't. I'll walk around and, see if somebody, maybe I'll see a pretty girl." I just made a little joke like that. And I don't know. I don't usually say things like that. And I was walking around. I was going out the door, and I saw this blonde lady flash in front of my eyes. And then I saw a ring and a ring finger, and I just kind of unflashed it. Kept on going. Yeah. Stay tuned for part 4. I'm going to tell it. Yeah, 3 weeks later, I get a call, same place. Another job wasn't nice. I said I'd go. I went. But I had burnt my nose 3 weeks earlier down there, and I had to watch my nose. I didn't burn it again in the sunburn, So I was careful. And then we were done. I had to go in the river just to cool off because it was really hot. And they come around with a speedboat or something, and they said, hop in. So I jumped in, sort of, but it was hard, and I sliced my finger wide open. It was like a paper cut, only deeper, and a lot of blood. And they were taking me somewhere, and the sun was beating down on my nose. I said, I need Band-Aids or whatever for my finger and my nose. And they had all kinds of Band-Aids. So I bandaged up my finger, and I put some Band-Aids over my nose, and then they left me off on these boats with all these people. I didn't know anybody, and they took off on me. I'm thinking, oh, they're not even thankful. So anyways, I hopped on the boat, and there was one place to sit down. I sat down, and I said, I need just to take a minute to rest. That was part 4. Let's do part 5. Why not? Yeah, what happened was I got on the boat, I sat down on that one chair, and there was a real pretty lady beside me, and she looked, and she saw blood coming out of my finger, and she said, what happened to you? And she saw the bandage on my nose. I said, well, I was getting in the boat, and I sliced my finger, and I burnt my nose. She looked at, she wondered, like, how would he burn his nose getting under the boat? But anyway, she didn't really say anything. And we were there a long time, had real fun, it was real nice. Everybody was nice. And the sun went down, or was going down. So I thought, I don't need the, she said, I don't need the bandage on my nose. So I took them off. And she looked at my nose, she said, there's nothing wrong with your nose. And just then, I noticed her ring finger, and it was that lady that flashed through my eyes earlier in the story. It was her. Can you believe it? Wow. Small world. Well, maybe I should tell you part 6, how that all ended. I don't know. Anyways, I did tell her. I saw her one time and saw what happened. And she flashed and unflashed in my brain. And, told her she probably shouldn't wear a ring on that finger, and she was offended and all that. Anyways, it turned out really nice for everybody. So, thanks for watching everything, and that's it. And please comment that you watched the whole thing. I appreciate it. All right, just say I watched the whole thing, John. It's a pretty good story. Bye.